Welcome back to Killer Conversations, everybody. I'm Austin.
Hi, everybody.
And with me, as always, is Amy. So today we're going to be unpacking the story of Ashley and Doug Benefield. And let me tell you, this one is a wild ride.
Oh, it is.
We've got whirlwind romance. We've got accusations of abuse. We've got a ballet company, and then ultimately a fatal shooting.
Yeah.
So, Amy, where do we even begin?
Well, let's rewind back to 2016 where their story begins. She's a 24-year-old ballerina.
Okay.
He is a 54-year-old businessman, and they meet and get married within 13 days.
13 days. I barely know what I'm having for dinner in 13 days.
Right.
Let alone who I want to spend the rest of my life with.
It's crazy.
So I got to ask, was this love at first sight, or were there other things at play?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something that we're going to be thinking about throughout this whole case, but right away you see that age gap.
Yeah.
Which begs the question of power dynamics.
For sure.
Like, was this truly a genuine connection, or was there some sort of imbalance from the get-go?
Yeah, and then on top of that, they decide to launch the American National Ballet together. Talk about a bold move.
A big undertaking.
But it fails, and it fails quickly. So I'm wondering how much that pressure, how much that failure played into the unraveling of their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the stress, the financial strain, the blame.
Oh, for sure.
It just seems like a breeding ground for resentment. And on top of that, during this time, is when allegations of domestic abuse start to emerge.
And you're right, this wasn't like your average marital spat. We're talking serious accusations being leveled against Doug.
Yeah, and she ends up leaving him seeking refuge with her mother in Florida. But even then, legal battles still continue to rage on in both South Carolina and Florida.
It seems like things were escalating pretty quickly.
Yeah, they were, and it all kind of culminates in this tragic event on September 27, 2020. Doug shows up at Ashley's home in Florida.
Okay.
A heated argument breaks out, and she ends up shooting and killing him.
So this is where the narrative splits.
Yes.
Right? We have Ashley's side of the story where she's claiming self-defense,
Exactly.
arguing that she was in fear for her life and she acted to protect herself.
Yeah, and her defense is really hinging on Florida's Stand Your Ground law,
Okay.
which actually a lot of people misunderstand. So for everyone listening,
Yeah.
this law basically removes the duty to retreat in a situation where someone reasonably believes they are in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm.
So Ashley's team is saying she was trapped, she feared for her safety, and this shooting was an act of self-preservation.
Exactly, but the prosecution paints a very different picture.
Okay. They did what they say.
Well, they're arguing that this was premeditated murder,
Okay.
that Ashley had planned to kill Doug,
Wow.
and that these claims of self-defense were a carefully constructed facade.
So two very, very different stories here.
Totally. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah. How do they try to prove this premeditated murder?
Well, a lot of their case rests on witness testimony and the details surrounding the shooting.
All right, let's hear it.
Well, for example, like a neighbor testified that he saw Ashley pounding on his door shortly after the gunshots, distraught and holding the weapon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the prosecution argued that her demeanor seemed more panicked, like a, oh crap, I just did this, than genuinely fearful.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then there's also that detail about the number of shots fired.
Yeah. I remember reading about that, right?
Multiple witnesses report hearing 6 gunshots, which, seems excessive if it was simply a reaction to an immediate threat.
Right, exactly.
So the prosecution used that detail to kind of suggest that her actions weren't solely driven by fear,
Okay.
but potentially by anger or even a desire for revenge.
Oh, wow. So you have these two conflicting narratives,
Exactly.
each with its own set of supporting details.
Right,
Classic he said, she said situation.
right.
Really all comes down to what the jury believes.
Exactly. And to try and sway the jury, both sides brought in expert witnesses.
Okay, so who did Ashley's defense team bring in?
They called upon Dr. Barbara Russell, who is a clinical social worker who had evaluated both Ashley and Doug prior to the shooting, and her testimony was pretty pivotal.
Or what'd she say?
Well, she diagnoses Ashley with PTSD,
Okay.
attributing it to the alleged abuse she endured from Doug.
Okay.
So according to Dr. Russell, Ashley's actions on that night were consistent with someone acting out of fear and trauma, a response really rooted in her past experiences.
But the prosecution, they weren't just going to let that stand.
Oh, of course not. They challenged it.
Right. So what did they do?
Well, they countered by bringing up another diagnosis that had been given to Ashley,
Which was?
histrionic personality disorder.
I got to admit, this is where I started to get really confused.
I understand.
How does this diagnosis play into a case about potential domestic abuse and self-defense?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it really gets at the heart of understanding just how complex this case is. What the prosecution was trying to do was portray Ashley as someone who is manipulative,
Okay.
prone to dramatic outbursts. So they were implying that her claims of abuse might be exaggerated or even completely fabricated.
So they're trying to discredit her claims by suggesting this personality disorder could be, skewing her perception of events.
Exactly, and it's a tactic that's sadly used all too often in cases involving domestic violence.
Right.
But Dr. Russell, she didn't back down.
Good for her.
Yeah, she acknowledged the diagnosis, but argued that it's frequently misapplied to women who are victims of abuse.
Okay, why is that?
Well, particularly when the evaluator lacks a full understanding of the context.
So for those of us who aren't familiar with this disorder, can you break down, why it might be misdiagnosed in cases like Ashley's?
Sure.
What kind of behaviors might be mistaken for histrionic personality disorder when in reality they are symptoms of trauma?
Yeah, so you have to understand that victims of abuse often develop coping mechanisms to navigate their situation.
Right.
They might become hypervigilant, constantly on edge, and may react intensely to perceived threats.
Okay.
This can manifest as emotional outbursts, a need for reassurance, or even what some might perceive as attention-seeking behavior.
Oh, okay.
But these behaviors are often rooted in trauma, not a personality disorder.
So it's like they're living in a constant state of fight or flight.
Exactly.
And their reactions, while perhaps dramatic to an outsider, are a direct result of the abuse they've endured.
Exactly, and this highlights the importance of having experts who specialize in trauma and domestic violence involved in these cases.
For sure.
It's not just about understanding the law, it's about understanding the human psyche
Right.
and the lasting impact of abuse.
So we have this incredibly complex interplay of legal arguments, expert testimonies, conflicting narratives. After 7 hours of deliberating, what was the jury's verdict?
Well, they found Ashley guilty, but not of the original charge of second-degree murder.
Okay.
Instead, they convicted her of manslaughter.
So kind of like a compromise.
Yeah, I think it suggests they didn't fully buy into the prosecution's argument of premeditation,
Right.
but they also weren't entirely convinced by her self-defense claims.
So they landed somewhere in between.
Yeah, a verdict that likely reflects the struggle the jurors must have faced,
Right.
grappling with the ambiguities of this case,
Totally.
the conflicting evidence, and ultimately landing somewhere in between.
And what was the sentence?
Ashley received a 20-year prison sentence and 10 years of probation.
Wow.
She's also required to undergo a mental health evaluation
Okay.
and complete any recommended treatment within 60 days of starting her probation.
Yeah, that's heavy sentence, reflects the gravity of the situation.
Absolutely.
A life was lost.
Yeah.
And the judge clearly felt that a significant level of accountability was necessary.
Yeah, and during the sentencing, we heard powerful impact statements from Doug's family.
All right.
His daughter Eva spoke about the unimaginable pain of losing both parents.
Oh, God.
Her mother had passed away previously.
Oh, wow.
It was really heartbreaking to witness her raw grief and the profound sense of loss she conveyed.
Losing both parents in such a tragic way is a burden no one should have to bear.
It's awful.
What about the rest of Doug's family? How did they respond to the verdict and the sentencing?
Doug's brother Wes actually offered a surprising response.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he addressed Ashley, directly expressing forgiveness and stating that he didn't hate her.
Wow.
It was a really profound moment of compassion and grace in the face of such immense loss.
That must have taken incredible strength and courage on his part.
Oh, absolutely.
It speaks to the complexities of grief and the human capacity for forgiveness, even in the most challenging of circumstances.
It really does.
We've explored the narratives, the testimonies, the legal complexities.
Okay.
But what about the bigger picture? The underlying factors that contributed to this whole tragedy?
Exactly, and we can't ignore the elephant in the room.
The age gap.
The age gap. Yeah.
It's impossible to know for certain how this dynamic played out in their relationship, but it raises questions about potential power imbalances
Absolutely.
and the dynamics of their connection.
And beyond the age gap, we have the failed business venture, the allegations of abuse, the constant legal battles.
It's a recipe for a toxic and a volatile relationship.
It really is.
This case really forces us to reflect on the warning signs of unhealthy relationships
Yeah.
and the importance of recognizing red flags before it's too late.
It's a stark reminder that love isn't always enough.
It's true.
And sometimes the most difficult, but also the most loving act is to walk away from a relationship that is causing harm.
And for everyone listening, think about this. How often do we overlook red flags in our own lives?
Yeah.
Or the lives of those around us?
That's a good point.
Are we paying attention to the subtle signs of unhealthy dynamic? This case serves as a cautionary tale,
It does.
prompting us to be more vigilant and proactive in safeguarding our own well-being.
And supporting those who might be in harmful situations.
This deep dive into the case of Ashley and Doug Benefield has been a roller coaster
It has.
of emotions and thought-provoking insights.
Yeah, and it's a story about human beings, their choices, and the devastating consequences that can unfold.
It challenges us to examine our own biases, to approach complex situations with empathy and understanding,
Yes.
and to recognize that the truth often resides in those murky gray areas, not in the simplistic black and white narratives that we so often gravitate towards.
Exactly.
To our listeners, we want to hear your thoughts, what resonated with you most about this case. Head over to our social media pages and share your perspectives using the hashtag #KillerConversations.
We always appreciate your insights and engagement, and we look forward to diving into another compelling case with you next time.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with another case, another story, and another opportunity to learn and grow together. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more Killer Conversations.